Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I am doing my March wrap-up. I need my phone because there were a lot of library books. Alright, we will go in chronological order this time. First, I read Jahanara, Princess of Princesses, which is part of the Royal Diaries series by Catherine Lasky. I do own this one, except that it's on one of those floating shelves and it's above my head and I don't want to stand on a step stool to get it, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I'm not going to. But I read this book when I was a kid. It's the reason I'm into Jahanara. Second to Elizabeth, always, right? But I love Jahanara. I think she's fascinating. And in the States in particular, there's not a ton of literature about her. More now than there was when I was in high school. And I keep looking for more because I want to learn more. She's fascinating and amazing and I love it. But I read this. It was 5 stars for me. It is, I would say, elementary to maybe middle grade, depending on your reading level. So obviously it didn't take me long to read, but it was super fun and quick, and I loved it just as much as I remembered. Then I read The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. This is the first in his Discworld series. I gave it 3 stars. It's not memorable, particularly for me, because I'm struggling to remember it. I know that there are elephants on a turtle in space, and that's like their world. I think it was interesting, and I think it was fun, but I don't necessarily obviously remember it, and it's clearly not a new favorite. So, it's a good, fun, quick, fantasy-ish, sci-fi-ish read, but that's all I've got. Then, oh my god. Alright, we're gonna switch these, actually. So my book club read Catcher in the Rye for our March book. I've read it before. I think I gave it 1.5 stars the last time. Maybe 2. I might have been super generous and given it 2. I don't know why. This book deserves no stars. It deserves to be thrown in a trash heap and forgotten. Because I don't know what the hell happened. There's like no plot. All there is some teenage white boy swearing at everybody, judging everybody, and being a general pathetic little lump. I realized that all of those words out of my mouth were very judgmental of this pathetic little teenage white boy. I googled this book to figure out what it was I was missing that made this book a classic. Some say it was a war book by Salinger, where he, kind of goes through his PTSD in a metaphorical sense in the book. And while that's probably a viable theory, because Salinger never did interviews or talked to anybody about the book. He wrote the book and hermited, so we don't know. I don't see it. It took me a month to read this book because I didn't want to pick it up. It is only a 6-hour, 45-minute audiobook, and it took me a month. Like, it just... I know it's written in the 50s, and I can understand that there's going to be misogyny and racism and ableism and God knows what else in there, and kind of steel myself for impact. Even so, I don't see a point to this book. I would rather read Lord of the Flies again. I said it. So this time around I gave it 0 stars because I don't see the point. It wasn't well written. I don't think it should be a classic. I don't think it's a good coming-of-age story, and I hated it. So that's where we're at. However, I then read The Women of Chateau Lafayette by Stephanie Duray, and oh my god, this was so amazing! Oh, I loved it so much. This is a triple timeline or POV story following Lafayette's wife, Adrienne, in the I think we start in like the 1750s and go through, obviously, her death in the early 1800s. And then we have Beatrice in World War I. And then we have, oh god, what's her name? Crap. Another woman, Martha. The French version of it that I don't know how to pronounce. And I'm not gonna try if we're being very honest. Martha in World War II. And they all have a connection in the Lafayette Chateau. Obviously Adrienne lives there and builds it up to its grandeur, and then it gets abandoned because of the French Revolution and a whole bunch of that stuff. But I loved it. I loved watching these women deal with their own trials and tribulations and connect with other women. The only fictional character of the main three women is Martha. Beatrice and Adrian obviously are real. So I loved reading a novelization of their lives, and I love reading about women who are overshadowed by the men in their lives, because I think that continues to happen today and has happened for the entirety of the Western world at least. And I suspect for a lot longer, because humans are horrible. But I loved this book. I cannot recommend it enough. It is so good. So in case you couldn't tell, and in case I didn't say it, I gave that one 5 stars. I also read Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb and gave this one 3 stars as well. During the month of March, I realized I don't like teenage boys as protagonists. They are uncomfortable, they're annoying, I don't relate to them, and they just feel pathetic. You know? And maybe it's that people have been trying so hard, maybe it's that I tend to read more women protagonists, or even teenage girl protagonists, and maybe it's that, you know, the women who are writing them make them actually feel like humans, but boys never do, to me. They just feel like little cockroaches. And I hate it. I couldn't stand the main character in Assassin's Apprentice. He was just, I don't know, boring and useless. I didn't really feel like the pacing was great. It had some interesting bits, and I'm really interested in what happens to Kari-ng in the next couple of books, which might be why I continue the series. We'll see. If I do continue the series, it'll take a long time. I could see why people really enjoy it. I just can't stand the protagonist. And by the time we got to the characters I was interested in, namely Kari-ng, we were almost to the end of the book, so it kind of defeated the purpose. Hence the 3. It was an interesting reading month, let's go with that. Then I buddy read You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emeze. So Chelsea, Katie, and I buddy read this one. Chelsea and I didn't realize it was a romance book, and it starts with a sex scene. Like, vivid romance level sex scene. Katie's never read a smut book. She has now. So that was unexpected. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this one. Well, that's a lie. I know how I feel about this one. 3 stars, like I said. I didn't like the age gap. I didn't like the whole love triangle-ish thing. The characters throughout, especially in the second half, felt like they were being forced into decisions and actions that wasn't their character, their personality or characteristic of them. And for a romance book, I didn't love how it was bookended with sex scenes. Like, I didn't like it. I did appreciate that both of the main characters, well, 2 of the main characters were bi. I appreciated the themes about grief, and I appreciated the vividness of the setting. That's what I've got. So, Abby, I know you in particular love Akwaeke Emeze. Be careful going into this book for the reasons cited, namely the sex scenes. We will also address their other book that I read, which is Dear Sinthurin, A Black Spirit Memoir by Akwaeke Emeze. This is a nonfiction in an epistolary sense, so it's a whole bunch of letters. Oh wait, I have this one. Haha! In a whole bunch of letters. It's a fairly short read. I gave this one 2.5 stars. I didn't understand it. It's very disconcerting, and I can't tell if it's me being stuck in my Protestant upbringing, like nobody is God, nobody is a saint, or if I actually think this person is delusional on an objective basis. I can't tell, but they repeatedly refer to themselves as a god, and Ogbanje, which is a Nigerian, like, changeling kind of thing, except a more serious version. And I found the little cultural references and bits of it interesting. However, the biggest reason for me that this got 2.5 stars was because it was triggering. This talks very deeply about self-harm and suicide, both attempts and ideation. I was not prepared for that, and I think even the second half of the book where I was prepared for it, it was not good. So if you are struggling with any of that, do not read this book. For the love of all that is holy, do not read this book. If that doesn't bother you, then great, have at it. I gave it a 2.5 because I didn't enjoy it, because it was super triggering for me. And because I just was uncomfortable, not in a way that I'm sitting with my own discomfort and trying to figure out my biases, but in a way that was just made me not want to pick up the book and didn't really get anything from it. I also read the Queen of Scots, The True Life of Mary Stuart by John Guy. I give this one, what did I give this one? That's a good question. 4.5. Why did I give it 4.5? Let's find out. Oh, yeah. I actually really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4.5, like I said. This obviously is a biography of Mary, Queen of Scots, and I found it really fascinating. It definitely... I still don't think Mary was as good a queen as Elizabeth. I don't think I ever will. And I recognize that a large part of that is my little, 10-year-old heart going, no, Elizabeth's better and always will be. I'm fully aware. But I also think there are times when, she just went with, my gut says one thing, my head says one thing, but I love him, and it just feels like she ignored all of the warning signs. Even in the 16th century, right? Multiple people telling her, do not do this, this is dumb, and she goes, meh, really? So I have a couple of questions and concerns about that. But otherwise, this was a really good book, and it definitely made me readdress a lot of the ways that I have compared Elizabeth and Mary, because he talks about specifically how, especially, now, 500 years later, we see Mary as having ruled with her heart, and Elizabeth as having ruled with her head. They both did both. Elizabeth vacillated all the time. She wouldn't make up her mind. She just did it in a different way. Mary did it predominantly with marriages. And so it turns out that dichotomy was perpetuated by John Knox, who was just a misogynistic piece of shit of a preacher at the time, who railed against Mary in particular, because she was Catholic. So it's a religious divide that he decided to make into an intelligence versus emotional thing for women. And that was really interesting. I think there were some discussions, specifically with Mary's third husband, Bothwell, that maybe should have been run by a woman, or at least not talked about necessarily in that depth by a man, because there were some moments. It wasn't Pillars of the Earth level cringe by any means, but it was kind of that that's not really how we think as women in society. But other than that, John Guy is a respected historian, and he definitely should be. He's a phenomenal writer. Then the last 2 books I read were Carnegie's Maid by Mary Benedict, which I gave 3.5 stars. This is a fictionalized account of a non-existent maid in the Carnegie household in the 1860s. It is apparently theorized that Andrew Carnegie, the man who started public libraries in the States, may have been influenced into his philanthropy by a relationship, but nobody knows, there's no proof for it. And so this book takes the author's history of, I think, being Irish, and her ancestors coming over to the States in the 1860s, and imagines if an Irish maid had fallen for Carnegie, he had fallen for her, and that's why he's a philanthropist. I think it was a well-written book. It was enjoyable. I just think it was really superficial, and there wasn't any character growth, and the pacing was a little bit off to me. But it was an enjoyable book. Then I read The Last Bookshop in London by Madeline Martin, which is also historical fiction set in World War II. Our main character, Grace, comes from Norfolk, in more of the country anyway, than London. She comes to London in August of 1939. 1839 has no relevance. 1939, on the eve of World War II, and to get a job as a shop girl. She wants a job at Harrods, in particular. Her friend Viv, who comes with her, gets one because she's a letter of reference. Grace doesn't. Grace's mother's friend in London gets her a job at this bookshop. And it turns out that Grace just falls head over heels in love with the bookshop and reading, and she finds the father she never had in the bookshop owner. And then they go through, obviously, World War II and the Blitz and the brutality of it. I really enjoyed this. I give it a 4 stars. I do wish there was a little bit more discussion of, you know, PTSD, because Grace is an ARP warden, so she's the one going out and making sure people get into the shelters during the bombings, and she's, you know, helping put out fires, and she's finding bodies. It's brutal. You're gonna have significant amounts of PTSD. Whether you call it shell shock or PTSD, I do wish there had been more discussion of that and more examination of grief and war and how it affected people's psyches at the time. But that said, I still gave it 4 stars because I still really enjoyed it. So yeah, I read 10 books in March and I am not mad at it. I'm hoping to get through a couple more in April, but depends on the length of them and we shall see. I think that's everything. So with that, I will bid you adieu. If you have any comments or questions, let me know down below and I will see you in my next video. Bye!